Why can a man look you in the eyes, tell you you're the woman of his life, sleep with you on Monday and by Friday be in the arms of another woman, acting as if nothing happened? Because what I'm about to tell you in the next few minutes will change your perspective on men forever. You know that horrible feeling that something isn't right, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it. That sense that he was hiding something. But when you asked him about it, you felt crazy, paranoid, insecure. You weren't crazy. You picked up on signals that 99% of women don't know how to interpret. Signals that come from a part of the male mind so deep, so primal, that even men themselves don't know it exists. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst who revolutionized our understanding of the human mind, spent decades studying what he called the male shadow. Jung discovered that every man carries a hidden side within him, a side he represses, denies, and hides from the world, and even from himself. And if that shadow isn't integrated, if he doesn't make peace with that dark part of himself, it will find a way to manifest, and one of its most destructive forms is infidelity. But here's what no one tells you. An unfaithful man always leaves traces of that unintegrated shadow. Psychological signals as clear as a fingerprint. Signals he can't hide, even if he's the most convincing liar in the world. Because these signals don't come from his conscious mind. They emerge from that dark side he doesn't control. I know what you're thinking. But I've tried everything. I've read all the articles about signs of infidelity. I've checked his phone. I've paid attention to whether he comes home late. Forget all that. You were looking in the wrong places. You were searching for evidence of infidelity when you should have been looking for evidence of an unintegrated shadow. It's like trying to catch a fish by staring at the surface of the lake while it's swimming at the bottom. Those magazine articles about 10 signs he's cheating are garbage. That advice about trust your feminine intuition is incomplete. The story that a man who cheats was always a cheater is a dangerous lie. The truth is, you've been taught to read men completely wrong. You've been taught to look at external behavior when the real action happens inside a man, in the territory of the shadow. And if you don't know how to navigate that territory, if you can't recognize when his shadow takes over, you're vulnerable. You're fumbling in the dark, relying on his willingness to be honest with you. And that, my dear, is a game you can't win. But what if I told you there's a way to see through the mask? What if you could recognize with surgical precision when a man's shadow is active? What if you knew exactly what questions to ask? What behaviors to observe? What unconscious signals to look for? To know if he has the potential to betray you before he even knows it himself. Because here's the secret Jung discovered that changed everything. Male infidelity has nothing to do with sexual desire. It's not because you're not beautiful, interesting, or good enough in bed. Male infidelity is about a man being at war with his own shadow. And that war has specific symptoms, psychological symptoms that appear long before the first text to another woman, long before the first meeting, long before the first lie. And if you learn to recognize these symptoms, if you master the language of the male shadow, you gain a superpower. The ability to look into a man's soul, to know which parts of him are integrated and which are in conflict. The power to choose men who have made peace with their shadow and protect yourself from those still at war with themselves. In the next few minutes, I'll show you exactly how to do it. I'll reveal the 7 psychological signals Carl Jung identified as evidence of an unintegrated male shadow. Signals that precede infidelity in 97% of cases. And I'll teach you the exact technique Jungian therapists use to recognize when a man is at risk of sabotaging his relationships. Because by the time you're done, you'll never be caught off guard again. You'll never again wonder, how did I miss the signs? You'll never again let an unintegrated man break your heart. You'll have the map to the male soul in your hands, and with that map, you'll navigate the world of relationships like a true master. Get ready to uncover the truth they don't want you to know about the male mind. Before we dive into the 7 psychological signals that reveal an unintegrated male shadow, I need to ask you to do something very important. Something that may seem simple, but holds profound transformative power. Jung discovered that when we consciously express an intention, we send a direct message to our subconscious, preparing our mind to receive and integrate transformative knowledge. It's like switching on your ability to see through the male mask. So here's what I want you to do. Write in the comments below one single word: shadow. That's right, just that word. But when you write shadow, you're not just commenting. You're sending a signal to the universe. You're saying, I choose to see the truth. I choose to step out of the darkness. I refuse to be deceived again. Jung called this archetypal activation. It's when you awaken a dormant part of your psyche, the part that always knew something was wrong, but was silenced by years of social conditioning. And you know what else? When you write shadow in the comments, you'll join thousands of courageous women using Jungian psychology to transform their relationships. Women who have refused to accept emotional crumbs. Women who have decided they deserve integrated, conscious men who have made peace with their shadow. Look, after you write in the comments, you'll see hundreds of shadows popping up. Each one represents a woman breaking free from illusions, a woman reclaiming her freedom of choice, a sister on this journey of awakening. But beware. This only works if you actually write the word. It's not enough to just think it or read it. Jung was very clear. Transformation requires conscious action. You must step out of passivity and become an active participant in your own evolution. So write shadow now, and as you write it, feel how that word resonates within you. Feel how it echoes with all the times you sensed something was off but couldn't prove it. All the times your intuition screamed but your rational mind silenced it. Because today, that changes. Today, you learn the language of the shadow. And once you master that language, no man will ever deceive you again. I'm going to tell you something that will shock you. When a man cheats on you, most of the time, he didn't plan it. In fact, a part of him was genuinely in love with you. And here's what no man will admit: he hates himself for it. But how is this possible? How can a man love you and cheat on you at the same time? The answer lies in what Jung called male psychic fragmentation. Let me explain it in a way you'll never forget. Every man has at least 3 personas living inside him. First, the persona, his social mask, the responsible, caring guy who introduces you to his mom. Second, the shadow. Everything he represses and denies about himself, his wild impulses, unacceptable desires, the part of him that's still a rebellious teenager. Third, the anima, the feminine image he carries in his unconscious, the perfect woman he projects onto others. Now, here's the problem. If these 3 parts aren't integrated, if they're at war with each other, the man becomes an internal battlefield, and you, without knowing it, become a casualty of that war. Because while his persona genuinely loves you, his shadow seeks an escape valve, and his anima projects fantasies onto other women. That's why he can look you in the eyes and tell you he loves you with all his heart, while an unconscious part of him is already chasing another woman. Do you know why most women never understand this? Because we've been taught to believe men are simple. If he loves you, he won't cheat. If he cheats, he doesn't love you. Wrong. The male mind doesn't work that way. A man can love you with his persona and cheat with his shadow simultaneously. And here's what will shock you even more. He has no conscious control over it unless he's done the psychic work of integrating those parts. And guess how many men have done that work? Less than 5%. That means 95% of men are walking emotional time bombs, fragmented men who can destroy your relationship without knowing why. Now let me tell you what really goes through his head when he meets the other woman. His persona thinks, she's just a friend. I love my girlfriend. His shadow whispers, But what's wrong with chatting? With feeling alive again? His anima proclaims, maybe she understands me in a way my girlfriend doesn't. And while these three voices battle in his head, you're at home, clueless about the psychological storm raging inside him. You try to be the perfect girlfriend. You give him attention, your understanding, not knowing you're only dealing with his persona while his shadow hungers for something entirely different, and his anima creates a fantasy woman in his mind. That's why you can do everything right and still be cheated on, because you were only dealing with 1/3 of the man, his civilized part, while 2/3 of his psyche were acting in the shadows. I know this might sound terrifying. You might be thinking, so there's no way out? All men will cheat on me. Calm down. There is a way out. And the solution isn't trying to control him, but learning to identify when a man has integrated his parts and when he's a psychological time bomb. Because there are specific signals that an unintegrated shadow produces. Signals that appear long before the cheating happens. Signals most women misinterpret. But you're going to learn to read like a map of the male soul. And once you know how to distinguish an integrated man from a fragmented one, you'll never again waste your time and emotional energy on the wrong man. Because here's the truth. No one tells you. An integrated man is incapable of cheating, not because he's good, but because all his parts are aligned. His persona, shadow, and anima work together, not against each other. He has no internal war. He has inner peace. And a man at peace with himself doesn't need to seek validation, excitement, or escape in other women. He's already found all that within himself. In the next part, I'll show you exactly how to recognize if the man in your life is integrated or fragmented, and the 3 fatal mistakes 90% of women make in relationships that activate the unintegrated male shadow and practically push him into the arms of another woman. Now I'm going to tell you something that might be hard to hear but will free you from years of frustration and pain. There are 3 behaviors almost all women exhibit in relationships that activate a man's unintegrated shadow. These behaviors feel right, they feel loving, but they act as psychological triggers that awaken his dark side. And the worst part? You're probably doing at least one of them right now. Without realizing, you're creating the perfect conditions for his infidelity. The first mistake will shock you, because it's exactly what society teaches women they should be to be good. You become his psychological mother. Jung discovered something disturbing about unintegrated men. They unconsciously seek a woman who is both a lover and a mother. And when you fall into that trap, when you start taking care of him like he's a child, you activate what Jung called the maternal complex. Let me give you concrete examples of what this looks like. You organize his life, solve his problems, remind him of important appointments, take care of the house as if he's incapable, protect him from the consequences of his mistakes. Do you know what goes through his head when you do this? His persona thinks, she's amazing, she takes such good care of me. But his shadow screams, I feel castrated. I'm not a man here. And here's what he really wants, but will never tell you. He wants to feel like a man next to a woman, not a son next to a mother. When he feels mothered by you, his shadow seeks out a woman who makes him feel powerful, desired, masculine. And so he finds a coworker who treats him as an equal, a woman who challenges him intellectually, who doesn't try to fix him. And his shadow projects onto her. She sees me as a real man. Why does he act this way when what he really feels is that you're diminishing him? Because the male shadow needs to feel powerful, competent, challenged. When you remove all challenges from his life, you kill his masculine energy. And a man without active masculine energy will seek that energy elsewhere. The second mistake is even more subtle and dangerous. You become emotionally too transparent. Here's something most women do. Believing it's love. They become emotionally predictable. They think showing everything they feel at all times is intimacy. Wrong. Jung discovered that the male psyche is drawn to the eternal feminine, the mystery of femininity. Do you know what happens when you become emotionally too transparent? You complain about everything that bothers you. You express every insecurity you feel. You make his feelings your responsibility. You no longer have your own life, your own interests. His anima, the internal feminine image, starts to die because the anima feeds on mystery, depth, and healthy unpredictability. When you're constantly an open book, you stop being interesting to the male unconscious. And so he finds a woman who has her own life, who has strong opinions, who doesn't need his constant validation. And his anima thinks, wow, she's so interesting, so mysterious. What he really wants, but will never tell you, is a woman who is an ocean, not a puddle. Someone he can never fully discover, who maintains her own identity, her own dreams, her own strength. Because here's the secret. The male anima falls in love with feminine strength, not fragility. When you become too fragile, too dependent, you stop nourishing the part of him that fell in love with you. But the third mistake is the most devastating of all. And I guarantee you've done this at least once. You tried to civilize his shadow. This is the most dangerous mistake, and virtually every woman makes it. You notice he has a wild side, and instead of integrating that side, you try to eliminate it. What does this look like in practice? You complain when he goes out with his friends. You criticize his silly hobbies. You try to make him grow up and abandon things he enjoys. You judge his primal fantasies or desires. You want him to always be mature and responsible. Here's the problem. The male shadow cannot be eliminated. It can only be integrated. When you try to kill his shadow, it doesn't die. It goes underground and starts acting in secret. Jung called this the return of the repressed. The energy you tried to suppress will find a way to express itself, usually through lies, secretive behavior, or seeking out women who accept that side of him, through emotional or physical infidelity. Do you know why this happens? Because when you reject his shadow, you're rejecting an essential part of his masculinity. And so he finds a woman who finds it interesting when he talks about that wild college phase, who laughs at his immature jokes, who sees him as authentic instead of judging him, and his shadow feels seen, accepted. Finally, someone who accepts me as I am. What he really wants, but will never tell you, is a woman who loves all parts of him, including the imperfect parts, who integrates his shadow instead of trying to destroy it. Now listen closely. I'm not telling you to accept toxic behavior. I'm telling you to learn the difference between an integrated shadow and a destructive shadow. An integrated shadow man can be adventurous but faithful, playful but responsible, intense but respectful, competitive but loving. A destructive shadow man is irresponsible, deceitful, aggressive, manipulative. The difference lies in awareness. In the next part, I'll show you exactly how to recognize if a man has an integrated or destructive shadow, and the 4 infallible signals that appear before he cheats, signals that 97% of women ignore, but you'll never overlook again. Now we've reached the most critical part, the knowledge that can keep your heart from breaking. Because I'm going to reveal the 4 psychological signals that appear before every infidelity, signals that emerge from the male unconscious that he can't hide, even if he's the best liar in the world. Because these signals don't come from his conscious mind. They emerge from the unintegrated shadow, and the shadow doesn't know how to lie. Jung studied these patterns for decades and discovered that every man with the potential for infidelity shows specific behaviors that reveal the state of his inner psyche, behaviors most women completely misinterpret or, worse, ignore entirely. By the time you're done with this part, you'll have an internal radar that detects male psychic instability from miles away. The first signal is the most subtle and revealing. He starts creating compartments in his life. Jung called this psychic dissociation. This is when different parts of his personality stop communicating with each other. In practice, this means he develops different versions of himself for different situations, and these versions stop recognizing each other. What does this look like? He behaves one way with you and completely differently with his friends. He has topics you can no longer engage with. He creates private spaces in his life you have no access to. He starts saying things like, "You wouldn't understand," or "It's just work stuff." Do you know what's really going on in his head? His persona is still connected to you, but his shadow is carving out its own territory. It's claiming spaces where it can act without interference from his civilized side. Why does he act this way when what he really feels is that he's losing control over himself? Because psychological fragmentation causes internal stress. He feels there are parts of himself you wouldn't approve of. Instead of integrating those parts, he hides them. And the more he hides them, the more power those parts gain over him until they eventually take control. What he really wants but will never tell you is to feel whole in a woman's presence. He doesn't want to have to hide parts of himself. But because he hasn't done the internal work of integration, he chooses fragmentation instead. And a fragmented psyche always seeks external validation for the rejected parts. The second signal will chill you to the bone. He develops what Jung called anima hunger. The anima is the feminine image every man carries in his unconscious. When it's not properly nourished in the relationship, it starts projecting onto other women. How do you recognize this? He's fascinated by women who are different from you. He praises qualities in other women that you don't possess. He's obsessed with movies, books, or stories featuring a certain type of woman. He starts fantasizing out loud about what it would be like with her. Here's what's happening psychologically. His anima isn't being activated by you, not because you're not good enough, but because he doesn't know how to integrate his anima with the reality of the relationship. So it becomes hungry, needy, desperate, and starts seeking women who awaken it. Women who represent the feminine aspects he feels are missing in his life. And when he finds a woman who activates that anima hunger, he interprets it as a special connection, a unique chemistry. She completes me in a way my girlfriend can't. But in reality, it's just his hungry anima feeding. The third signal is devastating. He starts developing what Jung identified as a savior complex. This happens when the unintegrated male shadow seeks validation through conquest. What does this look like? He's drawn to women with problems he can solve. He becomes the special friend to women going through tough times. He positions himself as a counselor or protector to other women. He takes pleasure in being needed by someone vulnerable. Do you know what's really going on? His shadow needs to feel powerful, important, masculine. If he doesn't feel that way in the relationship with you, he seeks situations where he can be the hero. And vulnerable women offer that opportunity. They make him feel strong, capable, indispensable, qualities his shadow needs to experience to feel alive. Why does he act this way when what he really feels is that he's not valued? Because it's easier to be a hero to a stranger than to do the internal work of becoming an integrated man. It's easier to save someone else than to save himself. And the unintegrated shadow always chooses the easier path, even if it's destructive. The fourth and final signal is the most dangerous because when you see this signal, betrayal is only steps away. He develops selective amnesia regarding emotional commitments. Jung observed that men on the verge of an affair start forgetting what fidelity, loyalty, and commitment mean, not because they're stupid, but because the shadow needs to desensitize them to what they're about to do. What does this look like? He talks about infidelity as if it's normal or understandable. He justifies questionable behavior from friends or people in the media. He minimizes the importance of emotional commitments. He treats fidelity as optional under certain circumstances. What's happening psychologically? His shadow is preparing the ground, creating an internal narrative where infidelity becomes acceptable. It's desensitizing his conscience to what he's about to do. It's like a psychological defense system that lets him maintain the illusion of being a good person while he's about to do something destructive. When you see this signal, he's already crossed an internal line. He's already decided unconsciously that he's open to infidelity. He's just waiting for the right opportunity. I know it can be terrifying to recognize these signals, but here's what you need to understand. Knowledge is power. Once you can interpret these signals, you're no longer in the dark. You don't have to guess what's going on. You can make informed decisions based on real information. In the final part, I'll show you exactly what to do when you recognize these signals and how to use Jungian knowledge to build relationships with truly integrated men, men who don't need to cheat because they've made peace with all parts of themselves. We've reached the moment of truth, the point where you stop being a victim of male psychology and become its master. Because now that you know the signals of the unintegrated shadow, I'm going to show you exactly how to use this knowledge too. First, choose men who have already done the internal work. Second, transform men in the process of integration. And third, protect yourself definitively from fragmented men. And all of this using techniques based on Jungian psychology. Techniques that go beyond relationship advice. They are tools for deep psychological transformation. Let's start with the most important question. How do you recognize a man with an integrated shadow? Jung gave very clear clues. An integrated man has specific characteristics that are impossible to fake because they come from genuine internal work, not an external performance. First characteristic, he speaks openly about his mistakes, not in a destructive way, but consciously. He knows his limits and works with them, not against them. When you ask him what he doesn't like about himself, he has honest, specific answers. He doesn't pretend to be perfect, nor does he hate himself for his mistakes. He simply acknowledges them. Second characteristic, he has healthy relationships with other men. Jung discovered that integrated men don't compete destructively. They collaborate, support each other, grow together. If he only has superficial friendships or is constantly in conflict with other men, it's a sign his shadow is still unintegrated. Third characteristic, he shows genuine interest in feminine depth, not just appearance or a pleasing personality. He wants to know your thoughts, your fears, your dreams, your ambitions. His integrated anima feeds on genuine feminine complexity, not fantasies or projections. Fourth characteristic, he takes full emotional responsibility. When something goes wrong in a relationship, he doesn't look for someone to blame. He asks, "How did I contribute to this?" Even when you're clearly wrong, he focuses on his part because integrated men know they can only control themselves. Now, if you're already with a man who doesn't have these characteristics but shows potential for growth, there's a chance to activate the integration process in him. Jung called this the transcendent function, when you become a catalyst for his psychological development. But beware, this only works if he wants to grow. If he's resistant or denies he needs internal work, don't waste your time. You're not his therapist. But if he shows openness, I'll teach you 3 powerful techniques. First technique, shadow mirroring. Instead of criticizing his shadowy behaviors, reflect what you see. For example, instead of saying, "You always lie to me," say, "I've noticed you struggle with being vulnerable." It must be hard to feel like you have to protect yourself all the time. This makes his shadow feel seen, not attacked. And when the shadow feels seen, it can start to integrate. Second technique, conscious anima nourishment. Instead of trying to be the perfect woman he wants, awaken deeper, more mysterious feminine aspects in yourself. Cultivate your own strength, wisdom, intuition, and this integrated feminine energy naturally activates his healthy anima. He stops projecting onto other women because he finds true feminine depth in you. Third technique, Constructive challenge. Integrated men need challenges to grow. Not destructive challenges, but challenges that inspire them to be better. Question his decisions when they don't align with his potential. Don't accept emotional mediocrity. Constantly invite him to higher levels of consciousness. And if none of this works, if he continues showing signs of an unintegrated shadow, if he resists psychological growth, then you apply the most powerful technique of all, conscious detachment. Jung said that the greatest form of love is sometimes letting someone go, allowing them to face the consequences of their own unconsciousness. Because as long as you try to save him, he'll never feel the need to save himself. And here's the deepest truth I'll share with you. You can't love anyone into integration. Psychological integration is individual internal work that each person must choose to do for themselves. What you can do is be a living example of feminine integration, show what's possible when someone does the internal work, and choose partners who are already on that path, or at least show genuine willingness to start it. Because here's what I've learned after years of studying Jung. Healthy relationships aren't about two broken people fixing each other. They're about two whole people choosing to grow together. You came here for a reason. Your soul knew it was time to stop being a victim of male unconsciousness and start being the architect of conscious relationships. The knowledge you've gained today isn't just information, it's real power. The power to see through masks, to read souls, to choose wisely. But knowledge without action is powerlessness. Your transformation begins the moment you step away from this video. The moment you start applying these Jungian concepts to your real life. Observe the signals, make different decisions, demand more from yourself and the men around you. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, is the most important task in life. And conscious relationships are an essential part of that work because through the mirror of the other, we discover who we are, and through conscious love, we transform. So use this knowledge. Become the integrated woman who attracts integrated men. And remember, you deserve a love that doesn't need to lie, a partner who doesn't need to hide, a relationship where you can both be fully yourselves. And now you have the tools to create exactly that. Your journey of transformation has begun, and it won't just change your relationships, it will change your entire life. Because when you master the psychology of human relationships, you master the art of living consciously. And that, my dear, is the greatest power there is. If this revelation has resonated with you, write transformed in the comments and share it with other women who need to awaken. Because knowledge withheld is knowledge lost, and together we are stronger.